Hi, my name is Andrew. Today I'm going to show you how I went from this to this to this in my latest Photoshop project. So we'll get straight to it. We've got our deer here. Let me get rid of the other layers. So we've got our deer. And basically when I'm looking at the deer, I want to just make this to show you guys like how I go through my process and just some techniques that I picked up that help me make things look really photorealistic. So when I look at this deer, the first thing that's wrong is its hooves are not like sunk into the grass, and the shadow looks like crap, because this is just an image that I found online. The only photo that I took is just me, my brother here, just in the backyard. This is on Christmas Day. I made this for Instagram. But so let's just start off. We're gonna create a layer mask. We're just gonna go in here. I'm gonna get a brush. I'm gonna use Alt to size it up and all. For right now, yeah, I'm gonna press X. That way, when I'm on my layer mask, I'm painting black, and I'm just gonna get rid of this. Okay, and now that I've got the shadow taken out, the other thing that I don't like is the way the hooves are, because you can see that I'm real and my feet are sunk into the ground. The deer is not real. Its feet are not in the ground whatsoever. And now luckily the image that I have, the colors and things like that, they kind of match up with the colors of my lawn. Whereas I'm wearing black, so it's much more noticeable, the grass coming up from the bottom. Whereas the deer, it's going to blend in a little bit. So I don't have to get too crazy with this. I'm actually going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of paint out the hooves a little bit. Just in certain areas, just so that it tricks the eye when you're far away and you don't really notice, what I'm doing here. Also, if I'm going through anything too fast or any of this doesn't make sense, just leave comments, because I just wanted to make this video to show my process in creating photos like this that look real in Photoshop. And there will be more videos, hopefully in the future, maybe at least like once a week, just going over certain techniques that I use, and I'll be checking them and I can comment back. And the other thing that I don't like in this photo is that just the color of the deer doesn't look right. That we're gonna get to once I'm getting into Santa. But for now, another thing is just the shadow. I painted out the shadow because that shadow didn't look good. So I'm going to paint in a shadow that looks more realistic to me. So I'm going to create a new layer. I just press Control Shift N, or you could just create a new layer. Guess I'll delete this. And I'm going to get a brush right here. And I just have black right now, so I'm just going to be painting on a new layer, black. And what I like to do is I like to take my opacity down about around 30, flow around 30. And I'm just going to zoom in here, and I'm just going to paint a shadow, because you won't notice that, or what you'll see is kind of the light is coming, a little bit like from this direction, kind of. So when I'm thinking about like the way that light goes, the shadow beneath the deer is just going to be beneath it. It's not going to be cascading out the way that the shadow was before. We need to just have a shadow beneath it. So I'm just gonna make my brush kind of soft, and I'm just gonna paint. I am gonna actually switch to my Wacom right now. I use a Wacom tablet, just in case you're wondering how I do certain things like this a little easier. But I'm just gonna paint. Nothing too, I'm not like very specific about how it needs to be for right now. I'm just kind of painting below it, and then I'm gonna create a layer mask in a moment here. And I'm going to use the same kind of technique here just to layer mask it out, or layer mask out certain parts that I don't want. Okay. Yep, so now we're going to come down here. layer mask. Just clicked on that. I'm gonna have my brush be maybe like this. And I also want to, before I do this, I'm just gonna take down the opacity. That way I can give myself a realistic view of what I really want this to be in the end here. And then and we'll even take the opacity of my brush down a little bit so that I can really just work on where I want the strength of the shadow to be at. And it can make it a little hard to visualize sometimes, only because the color of the deer is much brighter right now. Okay, so now I've got my shadow in there. We're gonna get to the Santa. I have this right here, this image. It's just of Santa falling. And now with this one, pretty much to start off, I'm just gonna need to cut him out, or just cut out a part of him. And a good way to do that I like to do, is I'm just gonna select the main layer. I'm gonna press Control 0 to bring me all the way out, Control A to select everything, and then select color range. And from here, I'm just going to use the eyedropper to sample colors. You can sample multiple colors pressing shift, you know, if you really wanted to do that, but I'm just going to use one. If you just press it without pressing shift, it'll, or if you click without pressing shift, it'll kind of restart it. But I'm going to sample the whites here. So I just sampled the white, sample another white, and another white. Keep my fuzziness, you know, about there, should be fine. And then you'll see it, you know, it gives me a lasso around the house. And from here, I'm just gonna get my Santa layer again, click on the Santa layer, and I'm gonna press the layer mask button. That way I'll have a mask here. And you can kind of see that it looks a little wonky though, the way that he's behind the house, and the way that my camera kind of captures like the red and blue outlining the house, kind of overlaps him weird and makes him look very fake. He doesn't look like he's really in the photo. So right now what I want to do is I'm going to press Control, click on the layer mask, press Control Alt R. That brings me to the layer refining menu, I guess. And then I'm going to shift my edge right down here to 100%. I also like to feather it a little bit, because you get a little bit of just natural like feathering on objects that are further away. So I'll do that, and then you'll see that it kind of grips the house a little better. Now I'm going to get my brush, make sure my brush is on, you know, black over here, and opacity, flow, 100%. I'm going to make this smaller, and then I'm just going to paint in the areas that Santa kind of connects with the house. I'm going to paint white, actually, is what I meant, not black. Yeah, I'm going to be painting white right here. Okay, and then I'm going to press Control D. I will deselect Santa, and yep, there he is. He looks good. So now is where we get to, in my opinion, the most important part about tying this all together and making it look real, and that's the saturation map. That's kind of my secret of making this look really good, is the saturation map. Now the saturation map is not something I apply to the image, it's something that I use to help me edit the image. So I'm going to come over here to the adjustments layer. I'm just going to go and get a selective color layer. It's at the very bottom when you're in the adjustment layers here, and you'll start off on reds, and it's going to give you all these sliders. You just want to take the black slider, make it negative 100%, yellows negative 100, greens negative 100, cyans negative 100, blue negative 100. Same with every color, every color pretty much. And then when you get to the white, you'll take this and make the blacks go to 100%. You make the neutrals at 100%, and the blacks will be at 100%. And now you can see certain things here that are more saturated show brighter. It's a map that shows you the saturation levels. Black being little to no saturation, white being the most saturation. So you'll see the deer, Santa, very saturated. Even my pants, the orange stripe that I've got going on, and then the Christmas lights and all that, you know, much more saturated than everything else. And so your glowing white areas, at least the ones I'm putting into the image, those are the areas that we need to workshop, Santa and then the deer. So let's get to the deer. What we're going to do is we're just going to get another adjustment layer, and it's just going to be hue saturation. And we're going to clip this by pressing Control-Alt-G. That's going to clip it down to the deer. And then, now the saturation itself, of course, is going to play a part in this, but so does the lightness, just a little bit. I like to keep, I think for this project I had it about at this. Since like I mentioned, the colors of the deer and of my yard are kind of similar, I wanted to make sure that he matched with my yard. So I have my saturation at 42, lightness at 18 for this, and then I can get rid of my selective color layer, and you'll see that deer looks much nicer. And now we'll do the same thing when it comes to Santa. With Santa, we'll turn on the selective color layer again. We'll get the same thing. We'll get a hue saturation layer in the adjustments area, and then we'll bring this down. We gotta clip it again, Control-Alt-G. Let's not forget about that. Here we are. I'll bring this to about what it was with the deer, like this. Yeah. Yep, there we go. And now you'll notice that his reds, the saturation of Santa's reds, match up with the reds on the house. You know, they're not, this red is not a glowing red that's much different than this. So that's a good way to check too, is if you have similar colors in the same frame, you can kind of reference real colors with fake colors to see what looks best. Okay, and then from here, I'm gonna grab a filter. We're gonna get a blur, a motion blur, and I already kind of have it set up here. It's an angle at about 85, 24 pixels as the distance, you know, that way he's not going crazy or anything like that. You know, and you can still make out what it is. Honestly, even maybe a little less. Less is more, I've noticed, when you're trying to make things look realistic. So from here, since our smart filters has its own layer mask, we can grab a brush. And before we even do that, actually, I'm just gonna, while I'm selected on this, press Control-I. That way no blur is showing up right now, and we're gonna paint in the blur is pretty much what we're doing. So on his foot, you know, if somebody's falling off a roof, their foot's gonna be moving real quick because that's a limb of theirs, and it's gonna be in quicker motion than other things. And then also like the hands a little bit, you know, maybe his hat. Okay. There we go. And now again, something that you might not even notice when you're way back here, but it just helps when you're looking a little closer and you can see things like that, the blur. Alright, so we're pretty much done. I wanted to just run through this pretty quick, just how to add things into a photo and make them look more real. I also did in my own project, I added noise to these, which if you're on the layer, you know, you would just be here and you go filter noise, and then it would come up add noise. And that's what I did also on these, so you could experiment with that. But yeah, this was just a kind of a quick tutorial, so let me know if there was questions or anything else you guys were thinking about. But here is what we had before, and here's what we ended up getting with those final 2 layers. So there we go.